Tom Hanks, thanks for joining 7:30.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Now, for Australian audiences, when it comes to US children's TV, we're all across characters like Big Bird, not so much Fred Rogers. So tell us about Fred Rogers and why he enthralled generations of American children.
Well, he was not for the broad swath of everybody who was a minor. If you were, say, 5 years old, 6 years old maybe, if you had any idea how the world actually worked, Mr. Rogers was not the television show for you. He didn't teach you how to read. He didn't teach you numbers. He taught you how the world worked. And so the audience that he saw that was being unserved by television was 2 years old, 3 years old kids who maybe did not realize that they could be sucked down the drain of the bathtub when they unplugged it, or didn't know how airplanes worked, who didn't understand that the world was bigger than just the own little neighborhood that they lived in. That was the audience, and that was the ministry that Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, was working on, just explaining the world to people, young people who did not quite know that why adults were the way they were sometimes, or why they felt sad when their goldfish died.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
Was he successful because he talked to children and not at them?
Well, he engaged them throughout. He looked right down the barrel of the lens. If there was ever anybody else on the show, it was somebody who knocked on the door and came by for a visit. He was quiet. He took delight in such things of different sizes of batteries that would go into such things like wind-up toys or flashlights, and then he would play with the flashlight just right then and there, just as little individual kids might do. So he saw television primarily being something that was either distracting children with children's cartoons and whatnot, entertaining them by ways of like throwing pies in their faces, or trying to turn them into consumers to buy certain toys or food products or drinks in order to feel like they belong. He did none of that. He instead was telling kids 3 years old so that they were special all on their own, and they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to change in order to make him like them even more. And I think in that regard, there was nobody else on television like him at all.
Was it intimidating for you at all to take on such a beloved character?
The difficulty that we had, and I broached this with Mari Heller, our director, was that Mr. Rogers had become a sort of staple, a brand, an easy reference of childlike simplicity. He became a punchline that everybody instinctively understood because of the way he talked and his cadence. And comedians, spoofers, any kind of like sketch comedy show could always reference Mr. Rogers, and the gestalt of his simplicity would by and large garner a laugh. We didn't want to do that. We had to get past the fact that he becomes so familiar in that vein, as opposed to a guy who was part psychologist, part reverend, and part-time educator, and who was using television to do something very specific that had become essentially a punchline. It's kind of like, if you're going to be examining, I don't know, you could turn Superman into a joke if you wanted to, or you could turn anybody who's big in pop culture into a quick gestalt reference. That is not going to do the job that this movie set out to do, which is turn him into a fully functional, cracked vessel and a human being that we recognize, as opposed to a show business personality that we have a reference to.
Fred's widow, Joanne, has lamented in this age of tremendous political division in your country, the United States, and great global uncertainty, how children of this generation could use the kindness, the decency radiated by her husband. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think the default setting for an awful lot of media and entertainment is cynicism. It's the easiest thing to go to. It's instantaneous conflict and jeopardy. Cynicism and some degree of denigration, kind of fear or outrage, or it sells, and it's a magnificent way to begin any sort of public foray. We're going to blow the lid off of something. Kindness, however, that's a choice one has to make, it seems now. Mr. Rogers, his default setting was one of trying to understand the other person's struggles, the perspective. I mean, he said such things like, on your worst day, you're still blessed. And believe it or not, there's somebody else in your world that's having a worse day than you are. That's a type of kindness that is, I don't mean to overuse the word, but the default setting, I think, in society right now is one of conflict. It's one of us versus them. And for Fred Rogers, there was only us. There was no them. And that, I think, the word kindness is probably the best overall bag in order to put his philosophy in. Fred Rogers was a kind man, and his television show did not celebrate kindness, but it was the operating mode. Fred Rogers didn't have to choose to be kind, he just was. And so therefore, I think, was an example to his audience.
Fred Rogers was one of the quintessential nice guys, a reputation, Tom, you of course have enjoyed now for many decades. So on face value, you're the perfect fit. Is it harder though, as an actor, playing the good guy versus the villain?
Well, it's hard to play a three-dimensional character. It's hard to play somebody that is multifaceted and is portrayed in ways other than the standard antagonist-protagonist narrative that I think most entertainment is. I think the concept of being nice is not the same, I think, as being kind and respectful. The nature of playing any character, being a quote-unquote good guy or quote-unquote bad guy, I think it's just not interesting unless you're going to see other examples of human behavior. Fred Rogers had moments of great self-doubt. He had moments of great conflict in himself. He was always second-guessing himself at the same time that he was trying to put out a best example of what he thought the real state of human behavior was. I'm not interested in seeing movies in which a bad guy or a villain has no other side to him other than that kind of line of, "Before I kill you, Mr. Bond, perhaps you'd like a tour of our installation." I like to play, and I see on film fully rounded characters that are cracked vessels themselves, and to understand that their motivations are individual, but not necessarily just one or two dimensional.
We had the great Sir Michael Parkinson on this show very recently, and he told us of the thousands of celebrities he has interviewed over the years. You, by far, were the most charming because of your modesty and your sense of humour. That is quite a compliment. Will you take that one?
Well, yeah, sure. I had no idea. We're not keeping, this isn't rocket science here. We're not keeping vast secrets. I think that there's a reason to be as honest and as authentic as possible. And at the end of the day, I think I'm an extremely blessed individual. Even in this circumstance, which you could view as kind of like the know, it's like the public campaigning for a motion picture. It really does come down to, we're just talking about movies. who can't do that? I mean, I do that in my spare time anyway. I'll take that compliment, and I'll keep that in my pocket for quite some time.
After nearly 40 years in acting, you've been honoured by presidents and your peers. Tom Hanks, what still excites you about acting?
Oh, I still think it's the greatest job in the world. I still feel as though I'm waiting for the cast list at the Skyline High School to be posted on Monday morning, and the auditions were on Friday. I can't wait to see what comes along. I don't have any other real skills, Michael. I wish I was good with tools, because if I was, then I'd be able to build a barbecue in my own backyard, and I would take great pride in that barbecue. I can't paint. I'm not a carpenter, but I do feel a great pride in the 40 years of longevity can sort of be the only yardstick for success, and I think in any realm, in any craft. And I still am excited and nervous and sort of petrified for the first 3 or 4 days of shooting a film, and wonder if we're doing this right. But it's the moment I read something that I think is going to be possible to turn into a movie, I start weighing it, sleeping on it, and thinking about it. And I don't think there's a better way to bide one's time.
Tom Hanks, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, 7:30.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.